Good evening and welcome back to a brand new episode of Around the Pit. My name's Toffees, as always, bringing you the show. You can find me at Toffees TV on Twitter if you are so inclined, though if you are not, I totally understand. I do want to give a big shout out to our sponsors before we start this shindig, the good people over at Razer for giving us a lot of the equipment that we're using, the guys over at ProBuilt Systems who have really helped out by hooking us up with the computer that we broadcast from, and of course the good people at Asus Republic of Gamers for helping to put some of the equipment into that computer. That said, let's get into the meat and potatoes, the stuff that you're here to see, the stuff that I'm here to listen to, and that is our guest tonight. So introducing them from left to right, depending on how you're looking at your screen, we have them above me right now. Number one on the docket is a gentleman who you can find on Twitter at TheDabCA, California, the TheDabCA, if you will. His name is Griffin Peacock. You probably haven't seen him. You may have heard of him, but he is the owner of Team Freedom. So if you guys are happy to see Jenkins continue to do his thing on the maps, mini maps, it's because of this young gentleman. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's actually Team Kingdom.
Shit, Team Kingdom, not Team Freedom.
That's fine, man.
Hashtag fucked up. We should restart the show, but I won't. We'll just go to the next person. That was 100% of my fail. But hey, you know.
That's fine. It's AnneeDroid. Everyone's the same.
You know, it's AnneeDroid, so I think I immediately in my head went to like Freedom, America, Eagles, stuff like that.
Exactly.
All right, so the Dab is here. In the middle, we've got none other than AnneeDroid herself joining us. I heard she came off of an 80-minute cast tonight, so she is going to be very, very tired, but I hope she puts up a very, very good performance. How you doing tonight, Annie?
I'm doing pretty good. It's all right. I'm a fighter. I should have something to spit here. Yeah, 80-minute game. At least I wasn't solo. Yesterday was a 103-minute solo cast that I was incredibly unprepared for. But yeah, just hello, everyone. I'm a caster, and I have some very strong opinions on the Dota scene at the moment.
There you go. How do you even prepare for a 100-minute cast? I mean, maybe a couple of anecdotes. As long as it's not pauses, I guess at least you have something to talk about. But the worst...
There was a 20-minute pause.
That's where life sucks. And a man who probably knows a little bit about that is a gentleman who does a lot of casting currently. You've probably heard of him. He used to be the Lyrical Gangster. Now he's just Lyrical Dota. It's Gabriel up there on the top right joining us. Gabriel, have you ever done a 20-minute pause? How do you handle that?
I had a 20-minute pause around that amount of time at the very beginning of one of my games, and I spent like the entire time theory crafting the mid matchup of Lina versus Ember Spirit, like doing the numbers over and over again. It was awful. I feel for you. So yeah, it's terrible when that happens.
It is a rite of passage for every caster, and if you can manage to hit it as hard as OD Pixel did, maybe your career can explode. That said, let's talk about the rules of the game because they are about to get underway. It is a simple show. On the top of the screen are little zeros. Those will become points, and every time that one of our players makes a good point or says something smart or generally funny, they get a point. Whoever has the most points at the end of the show wins the Aegis and a chance to stand on the soapbox for 1 minute, as well as come back to any show they desire in the future. The other big rule is every topic is 8 to 11 minutes, just like the Roach Pit. We've got a lovely little green buzzer here that I can't show you the whole thing because it's probably copyrighted. That said, when the buzzer goes off, the topic moves on. That's pretty much the rules. At any time during the game, any of these players does have a 1 minute soapbox they can activate to not be interrupted and to talk about any topic that they choose, especially one that has just ended. I think that pretty much covers it, and I will tell you guys something we added recently to the game is a 1 minute lightning round on the back end of the match so you can rack up some fast points. So get yourselves prepared for that because that will be coming a little bit later, and it should be a pretty good topic. I think we'll have some different opinions on where that's going. That said, are you guys ready to get this thing started?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it.
Ready to go.
First topic, as voted on by the folks watching right now, as well as those on Twitter, was Epic Center. Obviously, I misspelled it on purpose. This is the most recent tournament. It just ended. Liquid took the victory. Newbie made a great run. But a lot of people, and this is something I've been hearing over and over again, and this is a big statement for me, is this is the best Dota 2 tournament to date, production-wise, is what I've heard. They're saying it's better than TI3. They're saying it's better than Valve events. This was the ultimate. Is other than sound problems, though, I don't know that I can fully disagree. What did you guys think? Tell me about Epic Center.
I think that, yeah, at its highlights, like this was the be all end all. You talk about the individual like fan experience, being in the place, being able to see all the cool effects up on the top. So when it was at its best, it was freaking amazing. But like you said, there were still sound problems like in the last couple of days, issues with the frame rates dropping out a little bit from here and there, and like sometimes you would just get caster audio. I think that it was also made up for by the fact that there were some pretty good games, but again, it's probably the best that we've had as far as the high points, but you still have room to grow, and I think that that's always going to be the case pretty much. But I enjoyed the hell out of it. It kind of sucked that it was late at night, but it was really great.
Definitely. I can agree with the late night thing. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing about this Dota event that set it apart was that it wasn't a theater or a stadium that just had Dota going on in it. It was crafted to be a Dota experience. The stage was incredible. The viewer boxes, the giant Roshan clutching the player stadiums, that was super cool. There were little wards and towers throughout. So being there, watching it on stream was like being a part of a huge Dota crowd rather than, you know, kind of pretending we're a sport and being in a stadium.
I feel like the players also hyped it up a lot. You know, they had such a good experience that, you know, all they could do is tweet about it. So automatically you get more hype about it. Reddit posts going on it, and all the little things that go wrong kind of seemed not so bad. You know, oh my God, we had two games with Purge and Toby where you couldn't even hear them speak, really. And but you know, no one really talks about that. No, everyone talks about the high points because the stage was awesome. There was that Warcraft premiere with the funny interview, you know, translating both ways.
So do you guys?
That's the biggest.
Do you guys think that the fact that this tournament's coming off the back of some massive failures in terms of tournaments, including Shanghai Major and some other stuff, that helped it be that much better? Because viewership bars have been consistently getting lower and lower, and then this thing blows it out of the water? Or to you, when you watched it, did you say to yourself, "This is what we should be working towards. This is absolutely pinnacle"?
I think that it was really important. Sorry, I'm gonna steal that one. Yeah, like
I'll have my turn.
The one thing that I would say about it is like you talk about the two events that came out. One was Shanghai, which was a failure from a streaming perspective, but a success from when you end up getting to the main event of it and like a really cool actual finals to the tournament. And then you had We Play, which was a failure from the being there and being in person perspective, because everybody was like, the stadiums were empty, it was late at night, it kind of really sucked at the end. They put together the stage even while the group stages were going on, and then they had that like god awful green screen that was there. it was so freaking bad. And so this one, there's a little bit of a failure from the streaming perspective, but the main event was like really solid. I think that that's something that probably needs to get done more, is more emphasis on like large stadium type events and trying to build that environment up, and then leaving this is something that we'll eventually talk about, I'm sure, later on, is like the dynamic of streaming versus being there live. And as esports continues to grow, I think that there needs to be more emphasis on making those live events amazing, as opposed to just making sure the stream is good.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, there's a finished product that gets dished out. There's the stream, there's the games, there's the players, there's the panel, there's the actual being at the event. And I think there was a really nice balance at Epicenter. The event itself was awesome. Stream issues were minor. The games were crazy. The upsets were there. So the viewers got exactly what they wanted in a bunch of different realms.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it seems like they were trying to throw a lot of money at this to try and get a major in Russia. And I don't know exactly who, you know, paid for the tournament, but I'm guessing it's someone that threw $100 million.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but they do have a rich investor who is developing esports out there, is really invested in VP and sort of developing their outside of just their team, but their esports program. Yes, they threw a lot of money at it. The general consensus, I haven't seen the financial statements, but I'm pretty sure that most of us are pretty sure that there's not going to be a lot of money made by that tournament. They flew the players out first class. I mean, you saw the swag that they were giving out to everybody who showed up at the event. And it wasn't just the players, right? Normally we see players get cool swag, but like the managers were getting gifts as well. Everybody was getting stuff. How much of that do you think impacted the response? Because you brought this up, right, Lyrical? You said that Shanghai had great games. The production was brutal. The fact that the games were good. And I don't think we could say really games have been bad at any of these tournaments necessarily. We've seen meta shifts. We've seen dark horses. We've seen storylines. the difference in this one is everyone was happy from the get-go. How much of that do you think was because of the upfront investment?
I mean, I think as more money goes into esports, this could be a regular occurrence. I think a lot of it is because of the money. You make the players happy. You know, you don't lose anyone's keyboard. It's going to be pretty solid. Keeping happy players means happy teams, and you get the focus on the Dota. You get the focus on the, you know, the fun interpersonal drama, and that's what the people want to watch. You don't want to watch players be grumpy and miserable and angry tweets, because that, you know, hardcore player fans are going to think the same way as their players. If, you know, Bulldog or Universe tweets out like, oh, this is the worst event, then people are going to be like, yeah, this sucks. But people seemed happy with Epicenter from the very start.
This just seems like a big investment for the future. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. It's just, there's kind of a standard that needs to be set. And I know we might talk about this later, but of course the WISA, whatever you want to say, but it's happening. You know, there's some standard that needs to be set for tournaments, and you can't have players showing up and, you know, living out of a garage while they're at the tournament. It's just not gonna have good Dota because people are tired. They're living on Red Bull. Yeah, I think the play was consistently good throughout the event because you had good conditions, I guess.
There's a lot of ways to throw money at esports, and we've seen a lot of really failed ways to throw money at esports, and even some of the other streaming sites where like you drop $1 million on a player for a streaming contract in China, for instance, and then you get, you know, a lot of people that end up tuning into that maybe, but not necessarily. Like there's a lot of ways that you can drop a huge investment into esports and it doesn't pay off. This to me is probably one of the better like money hole sinks that we've seen. And whether or not that sort of comes back into them being able to host more tournaments and get the major, if it works out, then it's great. If it doesn't, it kind of sucks. But at least it was a cool tournament. So I think the jury is still out. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. So you want these investors to come back again. So you need to be able to find something for them after the fact. Because just like stream revenue and whatever else, the few sponsorships that they have aren't going to be enough.
Was it just me, or did the stand seem kind of empty-ish during the event?
It got smaller, definitely. Yeah, there was some slacking in.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like other, like, for instance, if you go to Southeast Asia for, you know, for the ESO1 Manila, that stuff was crazy. You know, everyone was screaming until the moment the players got on the plane. And then you go to, you know, and I think there's a big following in Russia, but I think, this is definitely an investment for the future, basically.
Definitely. Any last thoughts on the topic before we move on to the next one?
I think it was a great job. If tournaments can do this in the future, it will take a lot of money. It's very front-loaded, but making esports its own thing as opposed to trying to stand in a sports arena, giving it a whole experience, making it desirable to go to LANs, to host more LANs, I think is going to be a great thing for the scene overall.
Absolutely. All right, so that is the end of that topic. Let's move on to the next one, which is sort of an offshoot of this one. So we'll run right into it, and that is a lot of folks have been sort of talking about growing among giants. Is the major system choking out smaller tournaments? I mean, we still see constantly smaller tournaments going on, off tournaments, if that makes sense, but a lot of them are becoming big brand, and one of the questions is now, is Epicenter an example of what an off-brand or a non-major tournament is going to have to do to become a premium brand? And is that fair to sort of this grassroots movement that we've all come to love in the Dota world?
I don't think that you can say that Epicenter is like a good example of what third-party tournaments need to do, because there's no way that other tournaments can do what that did. Like without the money backing that you have, like you have to get those really rich investors online, and that, like, you can't pitch to them the idea of a loss over and over again. Like the third-party tournaments need to be able to make money, and I think it's more just the inherent problems with Dota 2 that cause the issues more than the majors. Like you make money off of sets, so if you find a set that you really love, you're not necessarily going to buy the new set because you like your old set better. And then you sort of have this like huge conglomeration of sets. And that's why we're seeing like battle passes come out to sell compendiums now, because they're an experience that you're selling as opposed to an in-game item. So it's kind of like third-party tournaments need to find another way to make money, because Valve since Reborn, haven't been putting through any third-party compendiums, I don't think. So it's a scary position. I don't know if it's just the majors, but it's sort of the majors in conjunction with the other problems that were already inherently there for the third-party tournaments.
Something that I brought up at when I was back at the team house, we were talking about the invites when they came out for Manila, and we realized, oh crap, there's only one spot left for America. What are we gonna do? And I kind of came up with this idea of what I think Valve's headed towards. I don't know if it's true, but it's something that I would do, is to have majors and TI have 16 invites, and then you have more minor tournaments. And so these third-party tournaments, which need to make money, can all of a sudden, let's say, have their prize pool sponsored by Valve. So you have like a minor from ESL, from Epicenter, from all these different things. And if you win, let's say you get top 8 in a major TI, you're automatically invited to the next one with a certain amount of roster changes. And then if you get a win, let's say top 2 in a minor, you're automatically given a position into the next major. I feel like this would solve a lot of the money issues because of that. And it also solve a lot of the stability issues because it would force teams not about, let's form for the next major, right? Like, and then if we don't make it to the major, then we're just going to disband and try again next time, right? I feel like that's where a lot of the instability is coming from. So that's my overall view of the third-party tournaments is I think they're going to become minors.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about though that because it does take away a lot of
events.
The grassroots movement is going to be cut out because it's all going to be Valve sponsored. Valve's going to have a really big hand in what's going on, what teams make it. They already have a lot of control over the game here, but having it be a complete monarchy without any third party, without any other organizations getting in and trying to change up the scene means we're going to get locked into one consistent pattern. And it's working for CSGO, the major minor system, but I don't think Dota is going to be the same. I think we need that change up. We need tournaments with different attitudes, different personalities to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be worried about it too if that is what they ended up doing. The other way that you could look at it is like if they try and do like the point system that a lot of people have talked about, and that also there's not like a great solution to any of this because if you do the point system too, and then you have it where like let's say that the summit for instance is now going to be worth this many points. That sort of legitimizes it as a Valve minor. But now you're in a situation where Valve is legitimizing certain tournaments and then you don't have competition within the tournaments. You kind of get stuck in a cycle where it's the same ones that are running it over and over again, maybe. I don't know if that's an issue unless it becomes a problem of people sort of getting slack with it, which I don't see as an issue for a lot of these tournaments. But I think that any time that Valve makes a small move, it has pretty monumental effects across the rest of the scene. And the scene has been developed and grown through competition and through sort of those watching votes. If you're watching a tournament, that means it does well. That means it's doing what needs to be done. And then it sort of grows from there. So I don't know. I don't think that there's a great answer as far as third-party tournaments go. It's in a really scary spot, I think. And I don't know. I'm curious to see what the answer is. There's a lot of smart people working at Valve. I don't know if they're incentivized to try and fix the whole thing.
Well, and that's the real question here is as we talk about Valve, are they actively saying let's find a better way to do this system, or are they just saying it's sort of a free market economy? And the idea with the majors is you earn a chance to host a major that we give you, and if somebody comes along and does it better, we give it to them instead. Which begs the question of, is that why Epicenter is willing to take a huge loss? Because they say, we know that we kicked the shit out of this, and next year we'll be in the running to get one of them.
Yep. And that's where I think the merit comes from. I think every tournament's going to start competing to try and become a major.
Well,
right.
And here's the question, though. Where do those small tournaments that have been grinding that aren't going to find a billionaire Russian investor who's willing to toss $100 million at a tournament have the input or the desire to say, well, I'm going to keep grinding it out and hopefully I get a major one day? They're going up against ESL Perfect World and a mysterious Russian investor in Epicenter to sort of get that.
Well, I think if we want to keep growing, it's going to have to be stable. It's going to have to be a few companies that run it. I think I just read an article about the CSGO stuff that's going on. And one of the big points was if we're going to have big investments and big growth, we need to have stability. Someone's not going to throw that much money. I mean, maybe some Russian billionaire is, but he's singular. He's just, I don't know what he's doing because this is a very unstable investment. I love Dota. There's a reason I own a team, but there's unless you control the things yourself, there's no stability. There's no guarantee of an outcome. So, and the only way to grow from here is with someone or a group of people telling people what to do. If that makes any sense. I don't feel like it can grow organically from here, or otherwise we're just gonna have another year of minor tournaments that don't really add up to anything, and all of a sudden we're gonna have these, like, let's say 10, 16, 20 teams that don't play anything.
So Dad's making a pretty bold statement. It sounds like he's saying that if we want to keep growing, we're going to have to give into regulation and organization. Do you guys agree with that?
I don't completely. I think that you're still going to have standouts. ESL is going to put on a better tournament just by and large than a lot of those other ones, but and the same with like Summit. They've got this like built-in infrastructure that's going to be able to make it happen. And I think that you look at a tournament like we play, granted, it was a success in that the games got played, people watched the stream, there were still sponsors that were there checking it out, but it's not going to turn into like a major. Maybe you still have a couple of those tournaments, and I'm not saying that we play is, but a tournament that happens to be like a cash grab where they just want to get a lot of revenue really quickly and throw together a product. So that's something that you need to be a little bit concerned about, but eventually those things are going to kind of die off, I think, as less teams want to go to them. So I don't know, maybe you have a big divide. I worry about big regulation also. That's the only other thing that I would say.
Yeah, Valve has an absurd amount of power over the entire scene, and we like to think we're independent, like we grew this from the ground up, but I think if Valve keeps taking over these tournaments, keeps offering prize pools, keeps offering this incentive to, have the biggest, best tournament and win a major, then all the tournaments are going to turn out the same, and you lose that originality. It's going to be hands by your sides panels. It's going to be the same talent invited over and over again, and there's not going to be those, new rising stars, the Reddit sweethearts that we all know and love.
It's an interesting point. It's something I think we often forget about, the idea that nobody really owns football. Nobody really owns soccer, right? So technically, if you want to start a startup league somewhere else, you could do it. You'd have to fight and invest, but someone actually owns Dota, right? And that's sort of a big change to the sports landscape that we haven't seen before.
A big point is that even though, let's say, the MLB has one league with set down rules, there's still up and coming stars all the time, especially in broadcasting. You have someone like Vince Scully who's been around forever, but you also have a whole bunch of people from different teams that that broadcast. There's always going to be new stars that make it through. If you're going to make it through, you're going to make it through. Someone's going to notice you if you try hard enough, try long enough. I mean, take the music industry, anything like that. There's also, how do I want to say this? There's also like a necessity for a tournament not to become stale. So any company knows this, that they can't do the same thing over and over again, or else we'd have, Windows XP forever. It has to get new, it has to get original. So a tournament won't go through the same iteration 100 times. It'll go through a different iteration each time, because they know, what's it called, the Muscle Man, what was that competition, ESL Manila? Macho Man, there we go. Something like that's going to come up, or they're gonna do a new competition, or they're gonna invite new people to try and change up the look. I think that having one organization or a couple doesn't necessarily mean regulation, but it means stability. And all I look for is stability.
Fair enough. All right, so let's keep moving forward in the interest of time. I think we had a good talk about where the leagues are, and I think that's you're right. We're going to see some strange tournament shifts over the next 2 years, and it may become harder to fund yourself as you get started, but the money at the top is going to be great once you get there. So good luck earning your spot as we continue to go forward. All right, let's switch it up a little bit here. Let's talk about some NA Dota. I used to try to hide the NA Dota bias, but at the end of the day, we're in North America. We're usually an NA Dota show. Usually the guests watch a lot of NA Dota. So fuck it. Let's just talk about it. There was a lot of great bylines at Epicenter, but one of the big ones, and we already sort of talked about it and we're chatting about it, was Complexity taking down Evil Geniuses. I called this one the Prince That Would Be King. We saw Complexity enter the ballpark in Dota 2 about I think it was a year and a half ago now, and have watched them sort of steadily rise. The question I have right now is the victory of Complexity over EG because of Complexity's steady rise or EG's fall? Is Complexity the new king of North America? What do you guys think? Did we get anything new off of this?
I don't think there's anything to be said about the new king, the new prince. It's a fantastic performance by Complexity. It's evil geniuses making a couple missed calls, but that doesn't mean one is necessarily better than the other. These upsets are what make Dota amazing. Having teams come in and crush the competition, being those underdogs, that's what keeps Dota watchable. Because if it's always EG or OG winning every single game, then why watch? You know what's going to happen.
Fair.
I think we're also coming to a point where there's no serious king anymore. It's more like a game of King of the Hill with a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Everyone has a chance to go to the top. Anyone else can throw anyone else off the hill. It's just a matter of, before it used to be, a 6 foot tall man versus all these kids, but now everyone's grown up. Everyone's realizing that there's a ton of talent. Everyone's kind of organizing into teams. I'll talk about my own team. I think we have a really good, we stumbled a little bit the last few weeks, but, I think the talent in any Dota or any, we're talking about people that have 6-7K MMR, and these guys individually are in the top 1% of the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a big part of it's just teams starting to organize and put out consistent competition that, one team isn't the king anymore.
Yeah, I think this established Complexity as a tier 1 tournament, or a tier 1 team rather, because I think the definition of tier 1 team is every tier 1 can take a game or has the potential to take a game off another tier 1, and that's what happened. We saw EG taken down, so Complexity have not necessarily overtaken EG in terms of they're now better, but they have established themselves as up there on the same level as EG.
Whenever I think about this sort of change too, it always comes down to me that I guess like you've got a much more importance now on teamwork as opposed to individual talent. And I think that all of the top players are now at a stage where you're capable of being able to win if you work more as a team. And if you have more synergy. You look at the top teams right now, you've still got Team Liquid. They've been together, stable roster throughout a major. They ended up being able to take it last time. They now take it at Epicenter. You look at Newbie, they didn't have the strongest or the most amount of time together, but when they were together, they played a billion games leading up to the qualifiers in Manila. They had H Cup that they were playing over and over again. And then you look at the two teams that underperformed, I would say, given where people were expecting them, Secret and EG, and both of those teams recently changed their roster. DC also, they've been showing a lot better promise, and I think that that's been based off the fact that they've been playing in so many qualifier tournaments. And I think that you can't really substitute official matches anymore. Like when the pressure's on, how do you respond? How do you react? Those are the real tests and how you get more cohesive as a team. And EG Complexity, I think that if you play those matches back a couple more times, like probably Complexity wins 6 or 7 times out of 10. But I think that by the time Manila hits, EG are probably going to be bringing that a lot more close.
Let me ask you this, and I want to pivot off of something you just said. You brought up the teams that did well and the teams that underperformed. Do you think that we're seeing a premium place in the scene, a growth of a premium placed on team houses and living and playing together at the same time? Because it feels like the teams that are sort of surprising people and growing quickly are team house teams, and the ones that seem to be underperforming are sort of the more classic style of everyone live in your own place, get together for scrims, do your own thing.
Or do you think coaches are the bigger issue?
Coach, I like that.
Yeah,
well, there's a lot of merit to having a team house. Sorry, there's just so much that you learn about somebody else when you are sitting right next to them while they're playing. And the fact that you can go over replays like on a TV and everyone can be sitting there watching the same exact thing, not scrambling over Skype call or TeamSpeak. There's also a lot of merit to coaches. There really is, because having a third party that doesn't have, I guess, they aren't like in the struggle. They aren't having little mini arguments with their teammates. They're not having.
Their ego's not at stake.
Sorry.
Their ego's not at stake.
Exactly. That's the next thing I was gonna say. They don't. They're taking constructive criticism from someone that they know is paid to be there for them. They're not taking constructive criticism from someone who just put a couch on their bed last night. It's really.
Yeah. And what Lyrical was talking about earlier with an importance being placed on teamwork and working together rather than necessarily individual mechanical skill, being in the same house with someone, living with them, learning how they react to situations helps you get inside their head and makes it a lot easier to understand why they're making the decisions they make with Dota. And that's going to be a very important thing moving on, knowing these people beyond just the Dota map.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And it's also focus. It's also the fact that you can take out all of these outside influences when you're at home, parents, roommates, dogs, cats, whatever it is, someone yelling outside, knocking at your door. This doesn't happen anymore because we have a manager or a team owner at the house. No one gets in the room while you're screaming. There's no one yelling in the background. And when we practice because everyone gets woken up from bed, you're dragged to your computer and you're made to practice. So there's a consistency that you don't find anywhere else besides the team house.
Cool. Any last thoughts on the EG complexity matchup, where North American Dota is at right now? You guys talked about sort of and anyone could take games off of each other in that tier 1 grouping. Mm-hmm. Are there other teams coming up in North American Dota that you think will soon be in that mix of EG complexities game swapping?
I think that you used to see a lot of tier 2 teams in North America consider themselves tier 3 in Europe, because there was this gap between, and for instance, if you scrimmed anyone in Europe, you just couldn't really stop them. But nowadays that's lessening, and you're seeing a concentration of teams like Shazam, Kingdom, Freedom, DC. All these teams are now always competing with a team like Complexity or EG. So I think that there's definitely a bright future for everyone.
Yeah, and I think one big thing about the NA scene that's kind of a staple is you have so many incredible players, but there's less of a focus on staying together as a cohesive team of 5. There's so much scrambling. There's so many new teams being formed, and there's crazy mechanical skill, but we talked about over and over again that teamwork that you need, growing together, playing together consistently, and that's what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was a big part of my job. Right after, when you drop out from Manila, it's a big rush. It's like, dang, we tried so hard. We practiced for 2 weeks. We're in this house and we just lost. And the hardest part is saying, guys, we'll just try for TI. Let's just go. And they all join because they're friends and they play well together. But when push comes to shove, you have to keep them together, and then you'll end up playing better than the guys that broke apart. That's why you see Freedom and DC staying together.
Yeah, I think that to me is one of the best points. Is I think that's the issue that NA Dota has had for a long time, is that people are just willing to separate. Also, leadership probably is another big one, that you don't have as many leaders. I think in NA Dota, don't know completely why. Maybe it's just something whatever, but it feels like all of those other teams, you look at, for instance, even Gold Black, he had a group of guys that he would work with consistently. He would try and pull 2 or 3 with him, and then he would make a team, and he would try and filter in and out one person. And just then you have another group, that Elements, that stuck together for a really long time. Team Spirit, which stuck together for a really long time. I don't know. I then that sort of fell apart, right. But maybe that's part of it also back in the day. I don't know. I think that if you have teams that are willing to stick together and ride it out for the long term, that's where you end up really seeing the biggest gains, and where it pushes you from either a tier 3 to a tier 2 or further up the line. And I mean, that's Complexity. That's OG. That's what they did.
Now, you said that NA Dota maybe doesn't have enough leaders. I sometimes wonder if perhaps NA Dota has too many leaders. And that's the real issue when you get these teams together, is nobody's willing to sort of sit back and be like, yeah, just tell me what to do. You don't see people napping during the draft as often. That said, though, that's about the time that we have for this topic. So let's move on to the next one, because I do want to talk about this. And because of where we're at on time, we'll probably roll it together, or you might talk about this in the lightning round potentially. But it is Team Newbie from Neglected to Perfected. These guys were talked about, but sort of, not incredibly in the mix, especially when we talk about Manila invites, and we'll talk about that later. So I don't want to talk about did they deserve an invite. What I want to talk about is what happened that made them go from sort of not on anyone's overall win radar, or on a couple people, I should say some folks predicted this, but going to the grand finals and going all the way to game 5 with a Team Liquid who just looked like they were playing out of their minds. Newbie played great. What happened?
They got a new logo.
They got the new logo.
New mascot too, right?
I casted a ton of newbie games right before the Manila Major qualifier. There was H Cup that started up. There were 6 seasons of it leading up to the Manila Major. It's something that no other region has right now, which is every single week, all of the top teams play each other over and over and over again. And it helps to really accelerate the meta. It helps to really accelerate teamwork and cohesion. You saw that with VGR being able to move into Star Ladder, take the first place shot there. Then afterwards, Wings Gaming ended up being able to take the the ESL 1 Manila. And then afterwards, Newbie came out of the qualifiers and just completely rolled over the rest of the teams. To me, the biggest part that they had was, again, working together and playing a ton of games leading up to it. It was really, really impressive the way that they were able to do it. And the addition of KP and Kaka on the support and off lane, I just think that those players were really, really technically sound, and everybody thought that this team had potential, but they thought that it was going to take a little while. They accelerated that by playing a ton of games, and they just play really solid Dota. Like there's nothing to exploit. You just have to be able to try and come in before they start hitting their stride, which is really difficult to do because it tends to happen early.
I think they just, part of what it's like extrapolating off what you were saying. I think they understood the meta better than anyone else. I think there's a reason that they just didn't lose 29 games straight. And I think their play was amazing. But you look at CDC from TI, they just understood how to win the game with what the heroes they had. They had these heroes, they fought, they smoked, took a tower, they won the game. When you had Newbie, they had these roaming supports, or they had, Chuan's just a god roaming. And I think there's something to being cohesive as a team, but there's definitely practice involved, because it looked like a lot of teams were, let's say, experimenting for the first couple of days of the tournament. And maybe some teams Fnatic didn't have a good showing in the wild card, but maybe that's because they didn't really connect with the patch as well as other teams. So I think something to do with that has to do with the patch, really.
Okay. So Newbie's definitely been training hard. I wonder if this new $1 million league that they've got going out in China for Dota 2 specifically has anything to do with that. Do you think that's just what it comes down to? They trained harder and they understood the meta better?
I think it's definitely a big part of it. They also, if you look at all of their games, and honestly, in the finals, they looked a little bit sketched out and not fully themselves, particularly in game number 1. If you watched back that team fight that happened in the bottom lane, KP wasn't able to get off his ulti on his Chronosphere off. They weren't able to get the Venomancer ulti off. And if that fight goes a little bit better and they don't tilt and then start feeding away their heroes one by one, all of a sudden you have a much better game, because they were actually leading up to that. So I think the biggest thing for me is that all of their players are incredibly skilled at each position. The KP Doom was 14-1 leading up to the Manila Major qualifiers, and that was first picked every time. So nobody had an answer to him. Literally in every single game that he played, he had these really high impact heroes. They were even doing things like running Moo mid on the Tidehunter and being able to just zone out a Dragon Knight there, because that was a popular pick. And then they picked Phoenix, and he was able to just Sunray over everybody to death on Kaka.
Sunray.
Every single time that they picked a hero, they just had such good game sense and awareness that they dictated the pace of the game consistently. And I think that that's why they won, is that they have a really good understanding of what they need to do in each stage of the game.
Well, if you look at how OG countered them, that was the first game they lost, correct?
Yeah.
Against OG. Yeah, that they just took over the game themselves before Newbie could. And I think they were the first team to really figure that out. They also figured out the meta really well, but they counter roamed them. They defended their lanes correctly. They pushed correctly. They knew how to end the game versus other teams. Kind of, I don't know. They might have not have had enough time to react to them.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely.
Then let's do this. Let's talk about, and we'll shift this 2 topics together right now, because we talked about Newbie, and I think a lot of folks are talking about Newbie, obviously, because their incredible streak, we said 29 wins in a row, is absolutely crazy. But on top of that, let's talk about Three's a crowd favorite. Liquid, 3 grand finals, finally gets the trophy. is a lot of hype about this is the team that we've been waiting for in terms of we've been waiting for them to come together, for them to really play at the peak of their performance. Are you looking at them as a favorite to go into Manila and take the whole thing?
I think we can go back to what we said about tier 1 teams.
I dig it.
They definitely have the potential. I think they have been able to cause some upsets, but that doesn't necessarily seat them at the top of the mountain. They're not this impenetrable wall that no one can tear down. They are good. They can play cohesively, but they're still going to get a run for their money because there's a bunch of other teams looking to get that slot as well.
I know there's also a shortage of, let's call it scrim time for tier 1 teams. I feel like what you're saying earlier, that there's nothing to replace an official match, the intensity of it. Scrims today are kind of testing out like loose ideas of what you think should happen, but there's nothing, you just kind of give up. You're like, it's a scrim, whatever, I don't really care that much. But then when you get to an official match, you have a team like EG. I think that they'll always be a favorite at a tournament, or not a favorite, but in the top percentile, because they're able to learn. And I think this is the biggest tournament, right after the patch. So I think that a lot of teams were using this as like a training ground for the major. And I think that basically basing off what Annie was saying, every team that's a tier 1 is a favorite to win a major at this time. There's no clear king to win everything every time.
I'm taking newbie. That's my king. I don't care.
There we go. Thank you. All right, because yes, any given Sunday, anybody can win. But at the end of the day, our job as talking heads is to pick a fucking side. Thank you, Lyrical, for saying that you think newbie could do it. I mean, who are you guys looking at? When you looked at the tournament, you looked at what's been happening. If you had to place rares, fuck rares. If you had to place cash on who's going to win the whole thing, who do you guys think it's going to be?
Alliance.
There you go. That's the one.
I hope with the team that has more MMR than any other.
Okay.
Really?
The OG. Bleed green, guys. I think that they hit a good stride in this tournament. I think No-Tail was kind of floundering in the last couple tournaments. He didn't really have like an idea of what he needed to play. And for instance, when they won the Frankfurt Major, like No-Tail and Miracle like played this great dual core lineup, and the cores that No-Tail was good at were really good in the meta at the moment. And then I think he struggled after that. And I think with this new patch, he's hitting a stride for mid heroes. I think he played a good DK. And Miracle, of course, is just godly at the moment. He's hitting these strides every day. And I mean, it's sad that Crit's best hero got nerfed, but Fly's Phoenix is amazing, and I think we'll see teams being better able to use it in the future. So like that, I'm for OG.
Yeah, I mean, I love OG. I think they're going to be doing fantastically. They've got a crazy individual skill like you talked about, and they have also put up those upsets before coming together after a pretty grim season and taking out Frankfurt. So they've got potential, but since right before TI3, I've been an Alliance fangirl, so got to stick with what I know.
I thought you were moving to OG. I was going to give you the Waffle Iron Award today, but we'll stick to newbie, Alliance, and OG. I'd love Alliance to win.
I like how nobody picked Team Liquid, the team that's
right?
on Epicenter. But I the reason that I'll say newbie, I didn't get a chance to explain it. When I saw them play in the best of 5 grand finals, it didn't look like the newbie that I had watched previously. And I had watched around like 20 to 30 newbie games where they would looking like really, really solid. And I didn't see anything that Team Liquid was doing that was putting them out of their comfort zone like OG was doing in that best of 3 where they beat them out. So I really want to see, I think that part of it is like Liquid, like you said, 3 grand finals appearances. They get the nerves out of them. I think that you could say that like around the first couple of ones, they're kind of choke artisty type of situations where they were struggling with the big spotlight on them. And newbie probably experienced some of the same stuff. Not to take anything away from Liquid because they played really freaking well at this last event, but I still see newbie having places to grow, whereas Liquid look really polished in what they do, but I haven't seen them do much outside of like that Liquid style of just run at you Dota.
I definitely agree with that.
I got that. All right. Let's see, guys. It is almost time to wrap this up, so let's go towards the lightning round. We've gone through about 6-7 topics now. I think we got a good base. Let's do lightning round. So basically what this is going to be is it's 1 minute for each person. I'm not going to mute your opponents because I want to hear if they pop off or have something entertaining when they're shocked by what you say. But You're the only one allowed to really soapbox, so you take it and run with it. 1 minute to talk about the topic. I'm going to tell you the topic, and then I am going to randomly use a number generator to decide who goes first, second, and third, and you get to talk about what the lightning round is. It is LGD versus Newbie on the Manila invite. Valve explained the why. After this weekend, is it time to re-examine that? It's going to be AnneeDroid going first. 1 minute on the clock. Start now.
Oh man, I think Valve has a lot of power here. We talked about them kind of being the monarchy here, and it's what they say goes. The teams are the ones that have to make an upset here, and LGG, they got the invite. Don't know whether or not they deserved it. I am not in a position to say. I don't have that much insight into the scene, but all I know is Newbie took the news like champs, fought like hell, and they're on their way. They're getting what they need to get done. They're not letting it slow them down. They're not going to be tapped down and out, and they're back with a vengeance. Let's see what they can put out, and hopefully that's a staple for the rest of the Dota community if they're able to go and not get invites from Valve, but still kick ass and get to be crowd favorites. Then, I think sites like Reddit and Dota and other sites like that have a lot of power and a lot of community behind them, and it's going to be community that continues to grow the game, and Valve listens, whether or not they want to admit it.
All right. Not too shabby. Next up is going to be Griffin, Mr. Peacock. You are on the clock. 1 minute. Go now.
So I think that Valve is very clear. I mean, any business is clear in their motives for why they do business. And the biggest thing about LGD being invited is the fact that you're inviting Xiao 8. And that's kind of apparent how any event that Xiao 8 goes to automatically gets viewers. Compared to maybe Chuan and Hao are the big two that people are going to really vote for a Newbie, but they weren't showing very good results until the qualifiers. But as far as that, I mean, you can always count on a team like that's run by Xiao 8. I mean, he'll carry the other 4 players across back to at least show some sort of result at a final. And I think it shows. I think Na'Vi was a great invite, but there's also merit to inviting someone like Dendi and Seneko and really upcoming stars and making sure that you have all the viewership. So I think Valve definitely takes like a more money-centered approach towards the majors than perhaps the community is proud of or wants. And that's why they picked 16 teams instead of whatever, because they just couldn't figure out who not to invite.
Whether or not you are right, I would give you a point for saying it like it is and dropping some strong opinion there.
Thank you.
You are last but not least. Lyrical, think it out. 1 minute to go. LGD versus Newbie. Is it time to re-examine? Start now.
We shouldn't have had as many invites as we did. That was a problem because while you end up ensuring that you're going to be able to get Xiao 8, you ensure you're going to be able to get Alliance, you ensure you're going to be able to get Na'Vi. That doesn't necessarily mean that we get the highest quality competition that you would want. That being said, the bigger issue is if they keep these number of invites, there's no way that Newbie get in. You look at the situation that ended up happening. Starladder was the only land that they could have ended up being able to get invited to, and at the time when Starladder qualifiers were taking place, it was H Cup Season 4. Newbie had just been formed. They were actually playing with a coach during that season, which meant that they didn't end up performing very well. And because of that, VGR ended up getting the invite over them. So even if there were 2 invite spots that tournament, it probably still would have been eHome and VGR as opposed to the LGD that ended up going. So I think that the bigger issue that we ended up really seeing was the time between each of the majors. If you look at Frankfurt, November was when that ended up taking place. Shanghai took place in March, which meant there was 4 months in between. The difference between Shanghai and Manila is 2 months, so there wasn't time for them
That's
to prove
the buzzer.
themselves.
You got a soapbox if you want to keep going. You can use your minute.
I'm going to use my minute right now.
All
okay.
Right. We're going to let him use it first, Griffin.
I'm going right after.
We're going to let him go because he's on a roll. So keep your minute going.
Okay. So that meant that there was 4 months in between Frankfurt and Shanghai, 2 months between the Shanghai and Manila major, which meant that there was no time for any of these teams to prove themselves at a LAN. There were literally 2 LANs that they could have ended up attending, which means that if you're going to base all of your invites off of LAN performances, you need to make sure that there's enough time for the teams that are getting into these qualifiers to prove themselves. Because if you had the same amount of time in between Frankfurt and in between these last 2 majors, Epicenter would have been a determining factor for who gets the Manila major invites. So for me, I think that maybe trying to make sure that they got the particular arena in Shanghai ended up paying a bigger difference than it would have otherwise. It kind of sucks it. That's the biggest issue.
Mm.
The end result is that you could also just make more teams qualify. So I think that if you're going to go 12 invites, you need to make sure there's enough time. If you're not going to go 12 invites, which I think you shouldn't, maybe go down to like 8 again, or possibly go down to 4. That's it.
All right, that's time. That was
like
actually
to-
really wrapped up. Soapbox
Soapbox
call for Griffin now. Lay it on me. You got 1 minute, go.
So I want to respond partially to Lyrical Gangster right here. What I want to say is that... Wait, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, good soapbox.
Okay, I'm going to talk about... Can I restart?
No, TikTok, homie.
No, can I? No, never mind. I forgot. Just move on. I'm just going to go all the way now.
I'm not going to take points away for that because that was just brutal.
Oh, it was about...
Annie, do you have a desire to use your soapbox, or should we just go to the wrap-up?
Man, just preach it, Lyrical. That was very well phrased and got really to the root of the problem. You got to give teams time to show themselves. So my soapbox is thanks, Lyrical.
Nice.
Yay.
I got it. One word.
One word.
Stability. If teams are more stable, it doesn't matter how much time they have. That's their main goal, right? So if they want teams to be more stable, they don't want more tournaments to be in between. So if you have a stable roster, then you continuously prove yourself. I think that's the biggest point, is so they don't really care about having time to prove yourself because they don't want you to have time to prove yourself as a new team. If that makes any sense.
That does make sense. I get what you're saying. I'm picking up what you're putting down. That said, it's time to put down the wrap up here, guys. It is time to wrap up the show. A big shout out to everybody who was involved, but a bigger shout out. We'll go down the points here. In third place, we've got a first timer on the show, AnneeDroid, putting in a 16-point performance. I think maybe got run over a little bit by some big talkers, but a solid performance nonetheless. And you also got screwed by having to go through the lightning round first. I think that was probably pretty brutal. Second place, we've got TheDabCA, 22 points, a respectable showing for a team owner who I don't usually expect a ton out of in something like this. So congratulations. And last but not least, coming in first, winning the Aegis and a chance to return, as well as 1 more minute to bitch about whatever he wants to, is Lyrical. I'm going to still call him Lyrical Gangster because I thought it was a badass name.
All right.
Lyrical Dota, you get 1 minute. Talk about whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be Dota related. Go.
Okay, real quickly, I talked to a couple people about this at the hub when I was there, and I think that there's a lot of times where people end up competing a lot to get content out there amongst people in the scene. There's a lot of competition to try and make ourselves stand out from the rest of the squad. If this is going to continue, like particularly after the Shanghai Major and how things ended up looking bad there, we really need to work together to make the scene better, because at the end of the day, if this is going where I think a lot of people are seeing where it's going, everybody gets jobs. Like ESPN, they have teams that just follow one particular individual team. I think stability is really good for the scene, and if we all work together to like actually improve the scene versus trying to, you know, undermine other people, not that that happens all the time, but it has been known to happen from time to time, then I think you end up creating a more stable area. So that's what I'm going to leave off with. Everybody work together and be happy.
All right, everybody be happy, and props to the Dab, because your soapbox ultimately backed up apparently what he said. So look at you guys working in tandem against Annie here. Guys, thanks for tuning in for the new episode of Around the Pit. I hope you had as much fun as I did. A big final shout out to our guests. I do want you guys to give a chance to sort of say where they can find you, maybe what you're working on project-wise, so on and so forth. So we'll just run right across the screen real fast. Griffin, where can they find you? What are you working on? What do you need us to know?
Well, the biggest one is at Kingdom Dota. We're playing right now with Newsham, Jenkins, Zizzy, and Susie right now. And they are having a lot of fun at a team house in Florida, working really hard. We're in Pro Dota Cup, we're in the Summit 5 qualifiers, and in Star Ladder. So make sure that's my biggest goal, is to get them going, because they've been working really hard. So give them a follow.
All right, check the guys out. I've loved them for a long time. I've followed them since their beginning, so I will 100% back that and say the man who brought us the Pudge camp or the Pudge lane pool to Jungle definitely deserves a couple of follows. Annie, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am a caster. I'm struggling to make it in the semi-pro scene. So if you wanted to check out my work or give me a follow, you can find me at Twitter at AnneeDroid, ANNEEDROID, right below my name right here. And on Facebook at facebook.com/AnnieCast. So go ahead, check it out. Let me know what you think.
Awesome. And last but not least, Lyrical, our grand champion tonight. Tell us a little bit about what we need to know.
Twitter.com/Lyrical Dota. Tomorrow I'm going to be casting Summit 5 qualifiers, so pretty excited for that. I think that I actually do cast a Kingdom game, if I'm not mistaken. Are you guys playing tomorrow?
Yes.
I could be wrong about that.
What's today? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to cast your team later, which will be good.
Sounds good.
So,
Sounds
cast
good.
it
that's where
early.
you can follow me.
Just give them a hard time, please.
Okay, sounds good. We'll do.
All right, guys. So that's it for the show. My name's Toffees. You can find me at Toffees TV, your Patreon/Toffees, or YouTube, or whatever the fuck you want to watch. Moral of the story, though, actually, I want to pitch this because I think it's going to be a lot of fun, is next week we're going to be starting the soft launch of a new channel. It's D2BN, Dota 2 Broadcasting Network, and it is going to be a 24/7 cycle of exclusive Dota 2 content. So stuff made by content creators, not gameplay footage, not streamers, literally talk shows, videos from people like Rocksoft Cookie and Fwash, the shows from people like Nahaz, Around the Pit will be featured there. A lot of different stuff going on around the clock. So if you just need something to put on your second monitor, no brain out, and listen to Dota, that's sort of the goal. So make sure you check it out. We'll be up and running by the end of next week. That said, have a wonderful evening. Thank you to Razer, Aces Republica Gamers, and of course, Pro Built Systems. We could not have done the show without you. And to you guys for watching. Really, you motivate us to be here every week. So I appreciate you, the guests. Have a wonderful evening. And as always, Toffees out.